All right, Josh, welcome to the podcast. I'm stoked to have you on board. It's really cool to have family members come on the show, especially when you can keep it relative to the topic. And yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. So welcome to the show. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend it with us and hang out with us.
Right on. Thank you. I couldn't agree more. It's good to be able to speak to the industry that we love, and whether it's line work in or specifically or electrical, it's all relevant, and it all kind of ties back to the same roots, obviously. So no, I appreciate it. I'm happy I could join you today.
Like we were talking just before, I get so many questions. We've talked about this a number of times, like so many questions on social media, especially from electricians. Usually it's around the path, like they're wanting to become line workers, because that's what I'm always talking about. So they're asking, how do I do that? And so on. So I'm stoked for this conversation because I think it's going to help a lot of them at least try to answer some of those questions that they have, some of the differences between the electrical trade and the line trade, because that seems to be another one of those massive questions. Like what's the difference? Like some of them go, since I'm an electrician already, can I just skip line school? And I go like, absolutely not. And they're just like, why? Like, why? And I'm like, there's no doubt you know a lot of electrical theory and a lot of things that line workers will never even dream of touching on at all when it comes to the theory of electricity and some electrical principles. But they're two different trades. So I'm stoked to talk about that. But before we get into that, let's wind her back. Let's just go back to the beginning. Tell us about yourself, where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Williams Lake, British Columbia, small town. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that one. The nice thing about a small town is you tend to know a lot of people. You have good relationships with different business owners, and that's always nice when you're getting into the industry, is to have this guy who knows that guy who can put in a good word for you, and sometimes that's all you need to get a good start. I I loved being a kid in Williams Lake, and I often talk about this with other people. You get that big town to small town mentality where they say, "Oh, well, how could you possibly enjoy growing up in such a small town? And what was there to do?" I never found that to be an issue. Living in a small town, there's there's plenty to do. I found myself, mountain biking and snowboarding and skateboarding and things like that. Whether it was doing those things or building forts out in the bush. I mean, those are things that kids that grow up in the city, they don't have the freedom to do. So it's very, very integral to who I am and why I got into the line of work I got into. So yeah, I mean, I got no complaints about growing up where I grew up.
I talk about that a lot on this, actually. When people, like, I just did an interview the other day, and they asked me similar questions, like about growing up and what it was like. And I say a similar thing. Like I enjoy Williams Lake. It looks like anywhere, I guess, anywhere. It's pros and cons. The pros about growing up in a small town are just like the things you just said. Like if you like the outdoors, it forces you to get outside.
Absolutely.
Especially when we grew up, there was just the invention of Nintendo 1 just came in. Like there wasn't anything else to do. There was no internet. There was no nothing. So
I couldn't stand those kids.
It was like comic books or go play outside. And that's what we did, is we got outside experience doing things like playing in the bush, like you said, like building forts, building things, or just hiking, hanging out, doing things like that. It progressed into other activities once you could, start.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get an affinity to have your hands on tools as a young kid out in the bush doing things like that. Your parents give you the freedom to do stuff like that, where you can't get that while you're in the city. But I can remember being not much more than 10 years old, and summer vacation, and loading up a wagon and dragging it out to the bush, and I'd take half my dad's garage full of tools up to the bush, and there was never any worry the same way that there is now. At 10 years old, I'd go up there and I'm hacking down trees and swinging an axe or using different saws and pounding nails. In fact, I'd have a fire built 20 feet away from me, burning off extra scrap and things like that. Can you imagine in this day and age if there was a 10-year-old kid out in the forest in BC, especially after the fires in 2017, just having a little camp out? There'd be national news day and age, right? So I think that you do stuff like that as a young kid. That's naturally what you're going to gravitate to as you get older. You're going to crave tools in your hand and the interaction with other people that share the same passion as you. And for me, that turned into electrical. I got a family full of linemen, and I always kind of felt like the black sheep because I probably, if I had pursued it, I would have had the inroads that I needed to get right into line work. And that wasn't me. I didn't necessarily want to just take advantage strictly of the easy path that was in front of me. I wanted to try something different. So that's where it kind of went for me. Was what's good, what pays good, what has always kind of interested me, and what's going to keep my mind engaged. And that's where I went. So
Yeah.
I'm happy with it. Yeah.
I remember that brought up a funny story. My dad came home from work one day, and he's driving home from work, and he sees these two big blobs up in the trees. And those two blobs were two tree forts that my brother and I had built in the trees at the end of the driveway. And we built these two tree forts out of his brand new lift of 2x6s. We took an entire lift, we split it in half, we grabbed a bag of nails, and we just started hammering boards up in the tree. I don't even know how we got them up there because they were high. They were 10, 12 feet in the air. We were so stoked over these tree forts that we just built with hammers and nails. And it seems silly, but that's what childhood was like. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was fun.
Not a chance. I wouldn't trade a single thing. I think that we're probably some of the luckier kids out there that we had parents that allowed us to do stuff like that, and then parents that not only allowed us to do stuff like that, but didn't make it the end of the world. I'm sure your dad was absolutely choked because I know how much he takes pride in it. Your mom and dad take pride in their yard and things like that. And I mean, I can only imagine that your tree forts were a little bit of an eyesore. They appreciate the fact that we're kids and we're out there and we're doing stuff, and we're not out causing trouble. We're out there playing around, having a good time. And, I mean, that's awesome. So,
you talk about parents. What did your mom and dad do?
My mom was a pharmacy technician. She's since retired. She was one of those moms that she was always there for us. She always had a very good approach to being a mom. She was methodical in her approach to things that went wrong, and I always really admired how she dealt with stuff like that. my dad, he did he did a few different things actually. You know, when I was young, he was working out of town a lot, doing bridge maintenance and building bridges and things like that all throughout the Caribou region. And you know, then he transitioned out of that and actually moved into not the electrical world per se, but he was working. We actually worked with your dad there at Interior Power, and kind of ran the shop and made sure that all the equipment was running the way it was supposed to be running and things like that. So no, they are they're still here. Are fantastic, fantastic parents, fantastic role models. I never felt pressured in my life to go down any one particular path. And just, you know, they were there to support and give guidance where needed. And you know, if I needed a little push in one direction, they give me a push in one direction. But that's one of the coolest things about my relationship with my parents is I never felt any real pressure to be anything other than who I was. So that, you know, that's good. And I know lots of, you know, people don't have that same luxury, and I really sympathize, and I wonder how people cope with that sort of thing. So no, I'm super thankful for who they are.
I always loved working with your dad. For quite a few reasons. One of the things that I don't think that people quite, or some people get it, and I think these are the good leaders, and then others don't get it. But that position that your dad held is such an important position, especially at a smaller company. Like my dad owned a small power line company. It was 1 to 4 crews, and it was so important to have somebody solid that can maintain the shop, maintain the equipment. It was like that jack of all trades that would figure it out and get it done. And just that, even the maintenance of the facility, like you can even go back to that. I've seen it both ways where you have somebody like that, you know, and over a 20-30 year span, how important that was, and how, you know, how well it was shaped. In the end, you look at that facility, or you look at that equipment, and you look at that yard, and it's all maintained and it's tidy, it's neat. And then I've seen it the other way where, you know, 20 years without somebody there doing that because, you know, people, you know, cut costs or whatever the reasons are. You see it and it's just like, wow, like, yeah, the facility just took a dive, or the equipment's just horrible. Like, it's important to have that position. And other thing I always enjoyed about your old man was just the breaks in the lunchroom. He's such a great storyteller, and I should honestly have him on the show just to talk about the places he's been, because his memory and recollection in a second of, you know, highway numbers and back road numbers.
Remembering roads,
yeah.
and like,
Dude, like
totally
corner number
random
4.
places.
Yeah. There was a left-hand turn on a mountain pass, and like
places
like,
you'll probably never go to, and you might not ever need that degree of detail. That's part of what makes his storytelling special, is that he remembers all the details. Those are the things that burn into his mind and make experiences special. But I couldn't agree with you more. You know, here we are talking about, you know, me as an electrician and you as a lineman. Those are 2 super solid industries, but gone are those individuals who are so multi-talented that they can do anything. You know, if my dad needs to do a little bit of an electrical job in his house, no problem. If he's out there and he's got to change the brakes on my mom's vehicle, no problem. Building sheds, building houses. There is nothing that people that possess that talent can't do. They're always constantly pushing to figure things out themselves. And I feel like that's something that's kind of lost on generations coming up now, is we tend to be a little bit too one-dimensional. Um, we don't necessarily take the time to look at how everything works. We we focus in on that one thing that we do, and I think that's something we need to try to change a little bit more. It's that, like what we're doing here right now today, where you've got a line crowd and you've got an electrical crowd. Well, what we do is very, very similar. Um, However, it's entirely different. I think that for people that are in the electrical world that want to move into the line world, or vice versa, like line work is tough work. We know that it's physically demanding. Sometimes that's not going to be something that's sustainable for until late in your career. You're going to transition off the tools into the office. You're going to find a safety position, whatever. That's not always something that's viable. There's only a limited amount of space that can can hold for those people. So electrical is actually a nice transition back. You're still staying within the industry, but now you're not necessarily into that physically demanding. You're not climbing towers. You're not guarding line trucks and things like that out of the mud as you're going up and down a right of way. You're back inside. Maybe you're falling into a maintenance position or something like that, where yes, you're still collecting a paycheck. You've still got 10 years of work until retirement. It's a nice transition back. A lot of the stuff that you learn throughout your career in line work is very relatable to the electrical trade. The theory behind electricity it's been that way for eons, right? It's that the theory is there, and that makes for an easy transition. Same going the other way. I know lots of guys that have moved from electrical into a high voltage world, whether or not that's actually doing line work itself, or if that's just working in substations and dealing with high voltage terminations and the switching and things like that. I know people that have done that, and you can be a journeyman electrician and take that knowledge and transfer it over to line work. It's not one day I'm an electrician, the next day I'm a lineman. It doesn't work that way. What you need to do is, you're going to need to go back and put in hours throughout the apprenticeship. You're going to need to probably go back to school and pick up a few different courses and things like that. But you can transition. It's not going to be easy necessarily, but you can do it.
And we were mentioning that, so that's a good point. Is like we were talking about. So I get the question a lot, and I talk about this all the time on social media, but we get this question a lot as linemen from electricians saying, well, I'm an electrician already. Can I just skip the schooling part of line work and just kind of write my ticket? And my answer is always no, obviously, but then I elaborate that a little bit from my perspective, but it'd be good to hear yours just about, I always just say they're two completely different trades, and they're two different trades for a reason. I say, yes, like you just touched on, the electrical theory and the electrical component of it is similar. It's similar, but even that in itself is worlds apart, like worlds apart. A line worker is very rarely going to even they get down to the low voltage side, but it's honestly just hooking up a house service. Like it's an easy part of what we do. Some of the transformation we get into is a little bit more technical, but even at that, a lot of banks that we wire and stuff like that, it can be all just done out of memorizing anyway. Like this wire goes here. Like you very rarely have to get into the technical. Okay, like how is this working? I got to change something in order to create a different voltage or whatever. So it's completely different from my understanding of the electrical side of things. So I'm glad that you brought that up and maybe give your perspective on that side.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it is entirely different. Um, you know, like I say, you can't be a journeyman electrician one day and a lineman the next day. You're going to have to go through the process, and that's, that's something that really does depend on where you live too, right? I mean, I know that here in Canada, even province to province is different. I can imagine the state is, from county to county, state to state, it's going to be different. But um, like you don't want to make a jump into one thing without actually understanding why things work the way they work. Like for me as an electrician, we don't deal with a lot of heavy equipment. There's a lot that in line work you're gonna I lost.
I know where you're going with that. It's heavy equipment. And I often say like line work is 90%, if not more, 90% rigging. Like it's, and 10% electricity. Like for the most part, like if you're getting into transmission, like, or even just in distribution work, you're moving hot wires, you're moving hot conductors, hot phases. You're not getting into too much technical wiring and, technical components of electricity and electrical circuitry. You're just like, you're rigging. You're using jibs and hoists and jacks and chains and slings and, like.
So I can assure you, you're not going to get a lot of that experience in electrical, and that's a great example, right? I mean, you could do electrical for 20 years, and the biggest thing that you rig is, is a fraction of the smallest thing that you rig in the line world. So, I mean, that's all part of an apprenticeship. Apprenticeship is not strictly what you learn as far as theory, because if it was, then the transition would be easier. It's what you learn when you're actually out there doing the trade
100%.
that you chose. So, I mean, it could be something as simple as the trade names for things. I mean, you don't want to go out there and not know what the guys are talking about. And that's something that comes with time and experience being out there. We deal with a ton of acronyms in definitely in electrical, and I would assume that's just in many trades in general. And an acronym from one trade to the next, you may have that, but it means something entirely different. So to forego the time that it takes to naturally learn your trade, I'm not saying it's not something that people haven't attempted before, but I don't think I would ever do it. I think I would want to put the time in and make a effective transition from one to the other, rather than just jumping. I mean, we're human. We want to be able to take advantage of doing things an easier way. That's just human nature. But I just don't feel like jumping from trade to trade is something you should do. Take a shortcut there. I think that you're better off to put in the time. Is it going to help you that you know electrical theory? Absolutely. Like without a doubt, you're going to be heads and tails above the guy that's coming in cold. But go spend the time. Spend the time with your hands on your tools, working with groups of guys, and understanding why you're doing things the way you're doing them, because that's what being in a trade is all about, is understanding why you do what you do, not just doing it because it's a paycheck.
Yeah, I talk about this quite a bit as well, just how it feels like we're it feels in a way like we're losing the apprentice, the master apprentice relationship in the trades, and how it used to be, go way back, and a blacksmith or something, you work hands-on, side by side, a master, and you're their apprentice. Like, and just saying that some stuff about blacksmithing and saying, hey, can I just be one, it just doesn't, that's what we're talking about here, is that you need to go through the apprenticeship portion of it, the side by side master apprentice learning component, where you learn the technical trade skills of the trade that you're applying. Yes, like you said, you're going to be able to challenge some of it, and I think you can challenge some of it if you're in the electrical field and you want to go into the line field. I think in a lot of areas you can challenge year 1 or year 2 schooling, because it is
Yeah,
that
I'd agree.
you already know. But skipping the apprenticeship portion is a no-go. That's totally different. Even you're talking school versus working side by side, the journeyman. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the
Yeah,
apprenticeship like for? Oh, go ahead.
it's
Go ahead.
the relationships you build with the guys that are teaching you. That like I mean, we've all had good journeymen and we've all had bad journeymen. We have the guys who are willing to teach and the guys who want to hold those cards close to their chest because they're afraid of their own job. So those are again very, very important pieces of the puzzle. You at at that point in time is when you start to decide whether or not you're going to be guy A or guy B. Are you going to be the teacher, or are you going to be the guy who's he's an ass to the other people that he's are trying to bring up. Our job as journeymen is to build new apprentices, regardless of what trade you're in. So I think that's the approach that I took. Who would I want to be? And the answer was pretty simple. I wanted to be somebody that could teach and just more than anything had a lot of respect for the people that were coming up through the trades, regardless of their current situation, right? I mean, we're not all superstars when we come into a trade. Some of us are late bloomers, and that's fine. You gotta have a real appreciation for everybody that's willing to, throw on those Carhartts in the morning and lace up those boots and come in. You have to be able to see beyond exactly what's in front of your face and understand why they are the way they are. So, I mean, it worked for me. And,
what was apprenticeship like?
I'm sure it'll work for a lot of other people too.
What was apprenticeship like? I get this question quite a bit too. Like, how did you get into it? Like, how do you start? That's one question.
Sure.
I get it for how to start in line work, but how do you start? How do you get in? What's your advice for people when they ask you that question?
Persistent. That without a doubt, you need to be persistent. It's very rare that somebody can just walk right into an apprenticeship. Myself, I went through some tough times, and I didn't know exactly where my life was going, but I knew I needed to do something. So, I made some tough choices and walked away from some things that could have potentially been detrimental, but I did it. And I pounded the pavement. Like I did not quit. There's a contractor that was back home in Williams Lake, and if not every day, every other day, before shift at a mill, I was going into this contractor, banging on the door, talking to the boss, saying, "You got a job for me? You got a job for me?" And it finally got to a point where I don't think that I got hired because there was a position or I was necessarily the right guy. I got hired because he was sick of me coming in every other day asking for a job. And he finally just said, if I give you a job when you leave me alone? And I said, yeah, I'll bug you on a different level, but you know, and that's what I'm here for. I'm here to do it, and it's not always easy. It really isn't. And for those out there that do walk onto a situation, well, kudos to you, because I think you're one of the few, and you should really appreciate the fact that it was easy. And then again, that ties back into the fact that, you know, the guy working right beside you, he may not have walked onto um, a job with you, and you know that's part of what's making him pick the way he picks. So just you know, keep that in mind.
That's a
You
good
know,
point.
once I got the apprenticeship.
Sorry, that's a good point. Let's touch on that for a second. I like what you said there, because that's important. Lots of people, like you said, everybody's entry point is different. And I had that as somebody that would hire. I was in charge of hiring all the union staff for a big company, big contracting company here in Canada. So I'd bring them on, and that would be my feedback sometimes. So once in a while, somebody would call and they just hit the lottery. Like, I needed somebody at that exact minute that they fit the description, like the stars aligned, and it was divine. And I was just like, okay, you're hired. And they're just like, what? So sweet. That's cool. That was easy, you know? And then that guy shows up at
Yep.
the yard the next day after orientation, shows up at the yard, you know, like that's how it is for everybody when he's working alongside somebody else who's been doing that job for 2 years, and it took them 3 years to even get in. And so he's got 5 years time. And here's this guy that just picked up the phone yesterday, made a fluke call, and he's in. So yes, be respectful of that. Go into that job like with humble shoes on, because not everyone came into it the same way. So that was a good point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I you know, I've encountered people that walk on, and I myself have been in a situation where I've done like cold hires, and um, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I like what you said there about hitting the lottery, because you know sometimes you hit lottery with the guys that you bring in too. You know, it is no different. You can have a horrible employee that works at the grocery store down the road, and you can have the best employee ever. And it's the same all the way throughout the entire workforce. You never really know what you're going to get, but let me tell you, when you land on the good guys, you never want to let them go. You want to do whatever you can to make those people happy, because they are the truest form of um, perfection when it comes to the work you do. I've had guys that, you know, I would hire them back in a second, because they're motivated, they're self-starting, they they demand the respect of the guys that work under them. Um, they just they're the best employees that a guy could ever hope for. Um, Strive to be that. Strive to, you know, strive to be passionate about what you are doing, because it does not go unnoticed. It doesn't. I will talk about select few people until the end of time, because I think that they're worth it. They are really really good at what they do. So,
So
but
talk about this a bit then,
sorry, I'll
because
jump back here too.
okay,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, jump back. What you're going to jump back into before
Well,
we
I was
get into
just going
those
to jump
next.
back to, you know, the rest of my apprenticeship there quickly, and just say, um, in high school and things like that, you kind of mess around. You don't necessarily um, put the time into school, because there's, you know, I'd rather be out snowboarding or mountain biking, and you're doing something like that. I don't want to be sitting at home studying and you know, making sure that I have a good GPA, so that I can, you know, go have this career that society thinks that I need to have, right? Um, so, you know, I want to make the point that, you know, once you get into school, for you know, the guys that are out there that are thinking about jumping into a trade like this, don't be afraid of the schooling involved with the trade that you're going to do, because your mindset's entirely different. you maybe you were a C plus student, or even if you had difficulties and you failed some courses in high school, that doesn't mean you're not going to succeed with your trade apprenticeship schooling. It means you're going to have to work harder. You're probably going to have to put more time in than the guy that sits beside you and just seems to naturally pick it up. But that's okay. Put the time in. You're at an entirely different place in your life when you go into trade school. You're probably not out partying all the time the same as you were when you were, in high school. Things change. Maybe your situation is you're a young father and you need to put food on the table, that sort of thing. That's the kind of stuff that's going to drive you to be a good student, whether you realize it or not. You're working for your livelihood, whereas before you were working for a livelihood that you didn't know if you wanted necessarily. I think that there's lots of people out there whose parents think that, they should be doctors and lawyers and yada yada, because that's what society tells us we are supposed to be. That's how we measure success. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not necessarily the case. We know people out there that they've got years and years of schooling, and they're not doing what they were trained to do. In fact, I know some that have actually got years and years of schooling and are now an electrician. So, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. Stay dedicated to the work that you're doing. It will pay off. And man, oh man, if you're having issues with something, reach out. The teachers that teach in the Institute for Apprenticeships, they love what they do. They are some of the most passionate people that I've come across. They will spend the time because, again, they're working on that journeyman to apprentice thing that happens out in the field, where you've got that guy who just wants to build awesome journeymen. They're journeyman electricians or linemen, and now they're in the teaching position. They're still passionate about what they're doing, and their job is still to build good journeymen. So just stay focused in school. It's not always going to be easy, but I guarantee if you put the time in, you can do it.
Yeah, that was solid advice. 100%. Don't be afraid of it. Do the work. Your mentality, like you said, your mentality completely changes once you're focused on something that you're interested in. High school, there's so many topics, and you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose what you're learning. When you go into a trade like this, chances are you chose it, and for some reason you like it. When you're interested in it, your focus and your whole demeanor changes. And that was good advice. That's solid.
I'll quickly add to that. My son said to me the other day, he's always been an honor roll student, and he's always made me super proud at how his grades were. Well, he's in grade 11. He's struggling a little bit more with school this year. A lot of that has to do with COVID and duration of classes and things like that. But math was always one of those things that he just kind of he understood. It was never an issue. Well, he struggled with the math involved in some of his grade 11 courses. But he stayed persistent. He did get through it. He's not going to be on that honor roll this semester, but that's okay. That sort of thing happens, right? But one thing he did say was that him and I have had lots of conversations. He's actually like to get into the electrical trade as he comes out of school, but he really hammered in on trigonometry, and we know that going through electrical theory, trigonometry is pretty key. So even if you can focus in on the little bits and pieces of what you're learning in school and how they relate to the trade that you hope to get into, focus in on trigonometry, because there's not a lot of trades out there that don't require trigonometry. So I guess what I'm saying there is the sooner you you can start to find out what exactly relates most to the trade you're getting into. Start to hone in on those things more so when you're in high school. You know, you may not hammer out all the math, but you're good at geometry, you're good at trigonometry. You know, if you want to get into you know, more management type roles, you know, English is important. You need to be able to speak clearly and motivate people. And those are things that you start to learn when you're in English classes. So, you know, focus in on what you need. Focusing on the little pieces that build the big picture.
That's I get that question all the time too. So thanks for answering that, because that's so key. I tell people looking to get into line work, it's kind of funny you say trigonometry. That wasn't going to be the first one I thought of for line work, though it is super important as well. The first one I suggest for line work is physics, actually, because it's back to that rigging component. The lineman's brain or the lineman's job is 90% rigging. So weights and forces, tensions, things like the physical stuff, so important. So just another one to add to that kit is physics. And I like what you said about English, so I'm going to highlight it again. I tell this to people and they go, what? Go back and take English? I'm like, if I could go back and do English again, I would pay way more attention and try way harder. I would actually make it some sort of a major, because if you cannot communicate in verbal or written form the thoughts that are in your head, good luck at trying to be a leader in today's world. The English language, or whatever language your language is, that language is so important. It's the most important thing you can learn if you're going to be a leader, because if you can't get those thoughts, those ideas, those things out of your head into written or verbal form and communicate it properly, you're going to struggle as a leader.
Absolutely. No, couldn't agree more. And it's something, like say, people just don't necessarily realize that, but couldn't agree more. That's a really good point.
Let's kind of skip right into I want to talk about your leadership, because we're heading towards an hour already. So I want to talk about your leadership roles, because I think that those are super important. Like, so briefly skip over, like after apprenticeship, maybe touch on a few of the places you went to work, and then lead into when you started taking your first like major leadership roles and how that transition was.
Sure. So, I mean, like I had mentioned earlier, I did the majority of my apprenticeship in Williams Lake. I took a turn. I guess I would have been in about my fourth year. Work was starting to slow down in Williams Lake. There was a few different things going on in my life that required me to, you know, move on from where I currently was. So I ended up taking a job working up in northern Alberta, working up in the oil sands, doing some, you know, all heavy industrial type oil and gas atmosphere projects. And, you know, I knew relatively early that I had something a little bit different than a lot of the other guys had. You know, like, you know, a lot of people are very content with just being a journeyman and just staying in that position all the way through. I always kind of had that little bit of a drive that was pushing me to go a little bit further, and then you almost get addicted to that feeling that, you know, you can do more, and you just kind of hop on that train and see where it goes. So my career path was, you know, I went from a fourth year apprentice to a journeyman to a lead hand to a foreman to a general foreman to a superintendent. And, you know, I think the last one I kind of topped out at was, you know, it was a general superintendent overlooking, you know, lots of different trades. So, you know, it was a quick road, and, you know, I would caution people that, you know, you can get yourself into trouble if you're taking on too much too quick. but that's a personal thing to determine whether or not you feel comfortable with what you're doing. For me, I did. So I like I say, I hopped on the train and I ran with it. So, you know, working in heavy industry, you know, probably the biggest thing that I noticed coming from, you know, a smaller company back home, going up north is safety. And I know you talk quite regularly about safety and how that plays such an integral part of what we do. You know, obviously the electrical world, it's a different set of hazards, but there's also a lot of very similar hazards just working around electricity. That was probably one of the biggest things that I encountered was moving from a culture of more get it done to a, hey, how can we do this safely and still, you know, maintain schedule and be efficient with what we're doing. So that's probably where, you know, I started to kind of find my voice a little bit more, and was, you know, I was interested in speaking up and being a little bit more passionate about how we could do things a little bit better, a little bit safer. And it just, I don't know, leadership is a tough one to really explain, because I think you either have it or you don't. And you know, I'm sure you'd meet some people that say I have it, and you meet others that say I don't, right? So, and that can't bother you. If somebody doesn't think you're a good leader, well, maybe they've got a piece of advice to share, and that piece of advice puts you up a notch, and you do become a better leader. So, yeah, I mean,
I say this quite a bit for people is, leaders aren't always like what you think. They're not necessarily, a leader doesn't have to mean you're the superintendent either. Is leadership comes at many different forms in many different groups. And you could have a group of, like grunts, we'll call them grunts for whatever term people call them. There's different terms for whatever place you're at, but that lower level position or that starter position, you get a whole room full of them or a whole yard full of grunts. Somebody's emerging from that yard as the leader of that group. And that's just people. So like you said, like people will naturally either emerge as leaders or not. For the ones that do have that in them, because I know the type, I know the person that's constantly, continually asking for more, and they like that. They want more in their life. They want to learn more. They want to take on more. And that's cool. That's good too. What's your advice for that person? Like you said one thing, like just take it easy, take it at whatever pace. Don't take on too much. Do you have anything else for that person that wants to take on more and is keen on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember where you came from. You know, you just because your path to the top is a little bit quicker, or you know, you feel like you're living the good life. Remember where you came from. Remember that it's the people that do the work for you day in and day out that are the true champions. They're the ones who consistently make you look good. You know, you have to be smart enough to see who the good ones are and who the bad ones are, and be strong enough to deal with that situation, whatever it may be. We've all been in situations where, you know, we got to make a tough call. We gotta let somebody go that we maybe don't 100% understand why, but we do. Stay strong, and if you've got a gut feeling, you kind of just got to roll with it. But yeah, I mean, just always be appreciative. Always be thankful for the people that are out there doing the work for you, because, you know, like I say, they're the true champions. They're the ones who you know, they make us look good. And I feel like as soon as you forget that, you lose them. You stand to lose a lot when you lose the good ones out there. So, you know, make sure that you're constantly reinforcing that they're important to your success, and you know, be grateful. Yeah.
What's your take on communication? I asked this question to to leaders, like communication in leadership and what that means. It means something, seems to mean something different for everybody. But what's the importance of being a good communicator as a leader, and what does that look like to you?
Well, if you're not a good communicator, I suggest that you don't become a leader. Um, you know, you have to deal with all different types of people, and you have to be able to adjust your delivery. You're not going to be able to give the same speech to the same group of people day in, day out. You have to be able to switch on the fly, assess a person, understand why that person sees things a certain way. Don't call a person down because they don't see it your way, or they don't see it the way that you've always delivered it to other people. Adjust, learn how to deal with multiple different people. I think that's probably the biggest thing is um, yeah, like just being versatile, being able to um, you know being able to push other people. Uh, that
It's
that's
it's
all I got
it's a
there.
great question. No, that's awesome, because there was so much in that, and that's why it's such a great question. Like, it means something different to everybody, and it's this thing that the reason I keep asking it to people is because I hear it a lot. I've heard it a lot in the past. We need to be better communicators. I need to be a better communicator. And I'm like, I don't think that a lot of people really sit back and almost like meditate on what being a good communicator means,
Mhm.
because communication means so many different things. So thanks for your answer. And for anybody listening, this is great. Um, this is great because this is the time that you should take now to reflect on what being a good communicator means to you and what communication actually is, because it's very, very important in being a leader. And you'll hear leaders say, what's the most important thing? Like, if you ask them, what's the most important thing about being a leader? Well, being a good communicator. Okay. but but that question again, like, what's a good communicator to what's being a good communicator look like to you? So sweet, I like that. Role, like, so talk a little bit about some of the teams that you've led, like the amount of guys, and if you have any other kind of advice on managing large groups of people, because that's something that this audience gets into as well. This advice for managing not just large groups of people, but large groups of tradespeople, because they're different than just people. And you just said that you had the experience to manage different trades, not just the electrical trade. So what did that look like to you as well?
Yeah, I mean, so I've worked with groups as small as like two or three, and I've gone up as high as close to 100 before. And obviously, you can't treat a group of a dozen people the same way that you treat a group of closer to 100. You have to adjust, and I think that's where good people come into play. You need to really get to know the people that are in that team. It's virtually impossible to get a 100 complete rock stars. You might be lucky if you hit 50%. Hey, good on you. I would say higher likelihood that you're gonna get 20% rock stars. But if you get those high quality people in there that are 100% in tune with your way of doing business, that's when you get success, because those people, they go out there and they push the same agenda that you're pushing, and they filter it down, and they hold the smaller groups accountable for their actions, and they either push them to be push them up to snuff, or they're able to weed them out and push them off the job. So I mean, it's not easy. You as a leader, you cannot think that you're going to have um, uh, the same relationship with every single person out there, but but you do need to have a relationship with them. You need to be approachable. You need to, you still got to be able to keep things light, be able to, kind of laugh and joke. That's one of the biggest things within our industry, right? Is the ability to laugh and joke and keep things light while you're out on the job, because what we're doing is, it can be tedious, but over everything else, it can be very dangerous. So, keeping the mood light is definitely important. Going into, being more of a multidiscipline type guy for a bit there, that's not always easy. And, you're not expected to know everything about being a millwright, being a pipe fitter or civil or anything like that. But you have to know enough to know when somebody is leading you down a road, right? Nobody likes to be taken advantage of. So I think it's really important that if you find yourself in a situation like that, that you pick your players. You learn who within those groups is the straight shooter, the guy that's not going to feed you full of BS and then send you off to a meeting. That's probably the biggest thing there. And then just be so eager to learn. Ask lots and lots of questions about what they're doing, why they're doing it. And, don't go into it with the, I think I've got a better way to do it, or I don't understand why you do it that way. It seems stupid to me. Go into it just completely willing to embrace what they're doing, and just having a completely learning only mentality. And you'll pick up stuff that you just, you never knew before, but now you do, right? And you're able to take that on to the next job, and it just makes you that much better every time you roll from project to project. But everything to do with leadership in my world ties back to the people that I have within a team. They will make or break you, and you just kind of have to be, you coach them where you can coach them, and then sometimes you just sit back and you let it happen, and watch and wait. And if there's somewhere you need to jump in, you jump in. But going from small group to big group, again, it's not easy. But if you're a person that likes a challenge and isn't afraid to ask questions, I can't even count the amount of times that I felt like an absolute idiot because I didn't know something super simple out there. And then you get people that are like, why is this guy the boss? Like, why is he overseeing me because I know I could do a better job? Well, that person is already not a good leader because they already think that they can do a better job than everybody else, right? So it's just this really, really strange little, I don't know, intricacy of the business,
So when you talk about those rock stars, that you're looking for as a leader, and what I want the listeners to hear is those rock stars can also, just like we talked about leaders coming at all levels, those rock stars can come at all levels, right? You can have a rock star apprentice, which is super valuable to have that guy at that level just be the best at that level, or journey person, or whatever it is, those go-to people at whatever level. What are you looking for in those go-to people? Is it work ethic? Is it reputation? Is it like, what is it about them that you're looking for?
Well, I think that, work ethic is super important, right? If you're eager to learn, chances are you're going to have a good work ethic, because you're not going to be the guy who's, leaning back against the wall waiting for something big to happen. You're going to be the guy that's in there. You're eager. You're going to be in there. You're going to be asking questions, and then just naturally by osmosis, you basically have, you have a good work ethic, right? Because you're there, you're asking questions. Those are always the ones that I would tend to gravitate to, just because, they're willing. Like they've got an open mind. They don't ever come in with the mentality at all. I've been doing this for X amount of years. There is no other way. They're always like, Well, I think I've always done it this way, but I think the way that you're saying it's going to work, and and it might actually work better. There's just, I don't know, there's a willingness there that you can see, and you want to help those people. You want to get them to a position of success, right? So I don't know. Like, I mean, sometimes it's just a gut feeling, honestly. You you can tell if somebody walks onto the job and they're cocky and they they think they know everything. They're immediately rubbing the rest of your group the wrong way. You just have to, those are the easy ones. Okay, well, this guy's not going to work and he's got to go. But some people, like I said earlier, some people are late bloomers. They don't automatically, like you say, they're not that rock star apprentice. They're the rock star 10-year journeyman who all of a sudden completely found their stride, and now it works. Another important thing too is with electrical, there's so many different things that you can be doing in electrical. You can be really good at building tray, and you have a real eye for the mechanical aspect of the industry, or you can be the guy who's in a PLC and he's just got that totally dialed in. You have to be able to pick your players. You have to be able to say, okay, well, this guy is super good at this, so I'm going to put him over there. And this guy's super good at that, so he's going to go over there. So a rock star in one aspect is not necessarily a rock star in the other. It can be the absolute opposite, right? And, in line work, I imagine you've got guys that are 100% termination.
Yeah, exact same thing for line work, for sure.
So that's where leadership comes in. That's where your ability to gauge that person's talent is the most important. I mean, I'm thinking of guys right now in my head that are just exceptional at one thing and not exceptional at the other thing, and that's okay. You are a good employee, and I will happily have those type of people on any job that I ever run.
And that's what makes a good leader. One of the aspects that makes a good leader is, like we kind of talked about, but I'll tie it in again, is recognizing that in the people that are working for you or with you, is recognizing that special skill that they have and using that to your advantage. Like, you can even take it as far down as, that's what I used to do sometimes too. I'd recognize, like, who is actually, if I'm weaker at math, so if I'm going to do some equations, I'm going to do some weights and forces and calculations, I'm going to find that math guy. I had that guy. He was the math guy. And I'm like, dude, you're checking my math after this, just to make sure I got this dialed. Like, but I'm humble enough to go to you and say, hey, can you help me with this? I just want you to check this for me. But that takes, that's a good leader, is being able to do that, but identifying that, or who's your operator, like who's that guy that no matter, you got to get a truck into a tough spot and you can't afford to get stuck. Who's going to do that for you? So
yeah, exactly. No, very, very good point.
Transition into, it's been over an hour now, Josh. Appreciate your time. Let's transition into a couple kind of closing questions. I wanted to talk a little bit about hobbies with you, and we glanced over it a little bit at the beginning. So I want to talk about it now, because I'm sure that this ties into this question and how you manage stress in your off time. So what kind of things are you doing in your off time that you like to do to just go blow off steam?
Yeah. First of all, absolutely, you have to have something like that you can do, because it is a daunting world if you don't have an outlet for your daily frustrations. For me, I absolutely love mountain biking in the summertime, and in the wintertime, I'm 100% snowboarding. So I love. There's nothing quite like getting out on the trail. You could have just an absolutely horrible day the previous day, and you get out there and you're grinding out a good uphill or something like that. That for me, that's it. And then same thing with snowboarding. I mean, you're free, you're out there, you're breathing the mountain air. You know, you're ripping down the hill. You're just having a great time. So for me, those are the big things. I honestly, I can't imagine what I would do without them. And then also just having a good person at home that you can talk to. That's, you know, it's a hobby of mine as well, is being able to have a good conversation with, you know, a loved one at home. You know, that's important. So, you know, I don't want to forget about that either. So
Yeah, totally. What are you doing any reading these days for one, either for like self-help books, whatever, or just, you know, purely entertainment consumption? Are you doing any reading?
yeah, you know what? I used to do a lot more reading, and then lately I've kind of fallen off a little bit. But one that I am reading right now is The Hidden Habits of Genius, and that's, you know, that's a decent book. I'm you know, kind of just getting into it, but just, you know, it kind of just briefly touches on, you know, what makes certain people tick, and what is genius. You know, what's exceptional, what's genius. It's a cool read. I would recommend that one to anybody. And then
Who's the author of that one?
hang on a second here. I actually forget who it is, but I will tell you.
And what was the full name of that again? The last kind of word skipped out.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, the book is The Hidden Habits of Genius, and that's by Craig Wright.
Cool.
Yeah, good read. I'd recommend that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, any podcasts or other things that you're listening to or consuming that would be valuable to share?
I mean, I'm a big sucker for stuff you should know. I think that's kind of one of my go-tos. Absolutely. I'm constantly amazed at the amount of information that those fellows can drag out of you know, a relatively menial topic. So I mean, I always appreciate that one. What else am I listening to? No, that's more or less it. That's the big one. But yeah,
Cool.
try to stay away from TV as much as possible these days. It's a little bit frustrating to watch, but you know, I think that there's lots and lots of other good information out there that guys can latch onto, guys and gals.
Absolutely. Well, cool, Josh. I appreciate the heck out of your time today. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to do this, and thanks for coming on the show. It was great.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the call, and hopefully everything works out good. But yeah, I'm really enjoying what you're doing, and I think that it's good for the industry.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.